During the 1993 to 1994 television season, the American networks canceled new shows faster than at almost any other point in broadcast history. We're talking about shows pulled after 2 episodes, one pulled after a single airing, and one that literally could not be watched in the city it was set in on the one night it ever aired, because a wildfire had taken over the local news. That is not a metaphor or a colorful exaggeration. That actually happened. 2 new rival networks were preparing to launch, the established broadcasters were in a full-scale panic, and the shows that didn't survive left almost nothing behind. Some of them deserved better. Some of them genuinely did not. Every single one of them got buried. Here is a detail that still feels almost fictional 50 years later. South of Sunset, CBS's expensive new crime drama, received heavy promotional airtime during the 1993 World Series, a prime placement that signaled serious network confidence in the project. Glenn Frey from the Eagles carried the lead role, playing a private investigator operating just off Sunset Boulevard in Beverly Hills, and the casting story behind that choice is worth knowing. After 4 months of failing to find the right male lead, Paramount executives attended a Frey concert, watched him command a room, and decided he possessed something that trained actors struggled to replicate. Not technique, presence. They built the whole show around it, budgeting roughly $900,000 per episode in 1993 money, which represented a serious financial commitment by any network standard. On the night of October 27th, 1993, the premiere aired, except in the places where it didn't. Malibu was burning, and West Coast stations, including KCBS in Los Angeles itself, preempted the broadcast to cover the wildfires. A show set in Beverly Hills could not be watched in Beverly Hills on its one and only night of network television. The rating that came back, a 6.1 with a 9 share, reportedly stood as the lowest ever recorded for a network primetime series premiere at that point, according to a 1993 Los Angeles Times report. CBS canceled it immediately, which by the production math meant the network avoided eating roughly $6.3 million in costs on the 7 unproduced episodes that would never be made. 4 completed episodes that had already been filmed eventually surfaced on VH1, but they never reached DVD and have never appeared on a streaming platform, which makes South of Sunset one of the most thoroughly inaccessible shows in network history. Co-creator Stan Rogow later reflected that they never had a real opportunity to show what the show could become, and by any reasonable measure, he had a point. According to that same 1993 Los Angeles Times report, South of Sunset was only the 4th series in television history canceled after a single episode. Coming off 8 consecutive seasons of Perfect Strangers, Bronson Pinchot approximately 3 episodes of Goodwill at CBS. The Trouble with Larry arrived in September 1993, built around a genuinely peculiar premise. A man returns home after being dragged away on his wedding night by a baboon, only to discover his wife has since remarried and moved on entirely. Courteney Cox appeared in the cast several months before Friends transformed her into one of the most recognizable faces on American television, and Perry King co-starred alongside her. The network pulled the show in October 1993, replacing it with the returning Hearts of Fire, and the whole enterprise evaporated after 3 broadcasts. Pinchot spent the following months watching his former co-star become a cultural phenomenon, while his baboon-driven comeback dissolved without comment. This one carries a particular kind of sadness because the casting reads well on paper even now. Faye Dunaway, Academy Award winner, paired with Robert Urich in a romantic comedy format for CBS, a combination that on any other autumn might have earned a longer look. It Had to Be You debuted in September 1993, and 4 weeks later, CBS announced an indefinite hiatus, which is network language for cancellation dressed in softer clothing. The show never returned from that hiatus. CBS Group President Howard Stringer had already articulated the financial logic driving these rapid exits. Committing to 13 or 20 episodes of an untested series was, in his words, unrealistic in a competitive environment, and the short-order strategy meant the network could limit its exposure on shows that weren't finding an audience. Faye Dunaway's CBS comedy became a clean illustration of exactly how that policy worked in practice. 3 episodes appears to have been the standard CBS Mercy interval during the autumn of 1993. Angel Falls starred Peggy Lipton, who had built her reputation across the original Mod Squad run in the late 1960s before returning to wide public attention through Twin Peaks. And the small-town soap drama CBS handed her lasted precisely as long as The Trouble with Larry. 3 episodes, then silence. The entire CBS autumn premiere slate from that season reads now like a sequence of brief experiments, most of which the network terminated before November had finished, and Angel Falls sits among the most thoroughly forgotten of the group. 2 episodes. ABC gave stand-up comedian Paula Poundstone a variety and talk format in November 1993 and pulled it before most casual viewers had registered that it existed. Poundstone ranked among the sharper comedic voices working in that period, which makes the speed of the cancellation genuinely difficult to explain in retrospect, because 2 broadcasts provide almost no usable data about a show's actual potential. ABC apparently concluded otherwise. The show aired briefly and then ceased to exist, leaving no DVD release, no streaming presence, and no meaningful cultural footprint. Poundstone continued working in stand-up and radio for decades after the cancellation, but the Paula Poundstone Show now exists almost exclusively in trade press cancellation roundups from late 1993, the kind of footnote that requires deliberate archaeology to find. Here is where the irony becomes almost uncomfortable. The Adventures of Brisco County Jr. launched on Fox in August 1993 on Friday nights, scheduled in a block, alongside a separate new show called The X-Files. Same night, same network, same premiere window. One of those programs ran for 9 seasons, generated a global following, and permanently altered the science fiction genre on television. The other one appears in this list. Brisco County was a science fiction western hybrid starring Bruce Campbell, co-created by Carlton Cuse, who later co-created Lost, and written in part by Jeffrey Boehm, whose credits included Indiana Jones and The Last Crusade. The creative pedigree behind the show was genuinely extraordinary, and the series itself was inventive, funny, and built around a sensibility that had no real equivalent elsewhere on network television at the time. Fox canceled it in May 1994 after 27 episodes, while The X-Files kept going. Campbell has sustained a devoted following across his entire career, and Brisco County eventually found its audience through DVD release and home video. But in the moment, the contrast between those 2 Friday night shows is almost cruelly precise. They shared a channel and a time slot, and one of them changed television history while the other quietly ended. Fox awarded Bakersfield PD a full episode order in the 1993 to 1994 season, which at the time represented a genuine vote of confidence from the network. The police comedy, created by Foof Sutton and set in Bakersfield, California, drew reasonably positive notices from critics and starred Giancarlo Esposito and Ron Eldard in a cast that had real chemistry on screen. The audience never arrived in the numbers Fox needed, and the network canceled it in January 1994 after 15 episodes. What the cancellation record cannot show is what Esposito did across the 2 decades that followed. He kept building, kept working, and eventually arrived at Breaking Bad, where he played Gus Fring, with such precise, controlled menace that the character became one of the most discussed antagonists in the history of American drama television. Bakersfield PD is a footnote. Gus Fring is not. I find something genuinely satisfying about timelines that eventually correct themselves, even when it takes 20 years to happen. The Critic is the entry on this list I will argue for most directly, and I am not interested in hedging that position. Jon Lovitz voiced Jay Sherman, the most comprehensively contemptuous animated film critic in television history, a character who had watched essentially every film ever produced and found almost all of them wanting. The show premiered on ABC on January 26, 1994, created by Mike Reiss and Al Jean, both former Simpsons showrunners who brought the same structural comedy discipline to a completely different format. ABC canceled it after 1 season. Fox then acquired it to pair with The Simpsons, which sounds like a second chance, and Fox canceled it again. 23 total episodes across 2 networks, which is the entire surviving record of a show that deserved a substantially longer run. Comedy Central's reruns eventually built the audience the show never attracted in first run, and web episodes appeared in the early 2000s as a kind of belated acknowledgement that the material held up. The Critic found its viewers, but they arrived too late to change anything commercially. That specific type of television outcome, the show that proves its worth after it's already over, carries a particular sting that never fully fades. The State began airing on MTV in December 1993, built around a troupe of performers who had developed their chemistry together through the New York improv scene. Thomas Lennon, Ben Garant, Ken Marino, Michael Ian Black, David Wayne, Michael Showalter, and Carrie Kenny Silver, producing 25 episodes across 4 brief seasons. Here is the detail that reframes the cancellation entirely. CBS approached the cast with an offer to move the show to a larger platform with a broader audience reach, and the cast turned it down. They walked away from the deal, the show ended, and the troupe eventually dispersed into separate projects, the most direct line running from The State to Reno 911, which Lennon, Garant, and Kenny Silver created, and which ran for 6 seasons. So the cast made both the correct long-term decision and the correct creative decision, and both of those choices resulted in the state ceasing to exist. That is a specific kind of outcome that sits uncomfortably between a success story and a loss, and the home media history only adds to the discomfort. Music rights complications delayed any DVD release for years. A disc finally arrived in 2009 with some tracks replaced, and streaming availability has stayed limited ever since, which means a show that helped launch multiple careers across 2 decades of American comedy is currently harder to watch than almost anything else from that era. My So-Called Life ran from August 1994 through January 1995, producing 19 episodes before ABC canceled it, and the public response to that cancellation was unlike anything network television had previously encountered. Claire Danes played Angela Chase in what critics at the time described as one of the most genuinely humanizing hours on American television, and Jared Leto co-starred as Jordan Catalano in a performance that landed with audiences in ways nobody had fully anticipated. Created by Winnie Holzman and produced by Ed Zwick and Marshall Herskovitz through Bedford Falls Company for ABC, the show also featured the first openly gay teenage character in American network television history, a creative decision in 1994 that carried real weight and real risk. The scheduling problem was direct and unambiguous. My So-Called Life aired opposite Friends and Mad About You, both of which dominated their respective demographics in that time slot, and ABC needed the show to compete commercially in a window where competition was essentially impossible. The critical recognition was genuine, but the ratings couldn't support continuation, and ABC canceled it after 1 season. What followed was something nobody in the television industry had seen before. Fans organized an online petition to save the show, a campaign that has since been cited as the first major online petition in television history, which means a canceled teen drama from 1994 accidentally invented a form of audience advocacy that the internet has deployed in every subsequent decade. The show reached its 30th anniversary in 2024 with its streaming availability intact and its cultural argument still running. 30 years of people debating whether ABC made the right call is, by itself, a form of legacy that the network's ratings logic could never have predicted. The connective thread running through all of these shows is not that they were uniformly bad, because several of them were not. South of Sunset had real structural problems that extended beyond the Wildfire preemption, and the trouble with Larry's Baboon-based premise was not misunderstood genius waiting for the right audience to discover it. What the Critic offered was genuinely sharp. What My So-Called Life built was genuinely important, and what Brisco County brought in terms of creative DNA was remarkable by any honest measure. The state helped generate careers that shaped American comedy across the following 2 decades. What ended these shows was a combination of network impatience, punishing scheduling decisions, and a television industry in the middle of structural upheaval. With 2 new networks preparing to launch, cable accelerating its expansion, and the major broadcasters contracting their episode orders and pulling struggling shows faster than audiences could locate them. The shows that survived 1994 often had the right time slot as much as the right content, and the ones that didn't survive were sometimes simply unlucky enough to premiere in the wrong window, opposite the wrong competition, or, in one particularly specific case, on the one night a wildfire made it impossible to broadcast in the city where the show was actually set. That is what the television graveyard of 1994 actually looks like. Not a catalog of failures, a catalog of casualties. If the distance between what Hollywood remembers and what it quietly erases is something you find yourself returning to, this channel keeps pulling those stories back into the light.